screen. Can you see my screen? Oh yes, thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
I've got a thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you very much. So my name is Mona Sithota. I'm the network technical head for drainage and line side at Network Rail. My background is not on trees. So I've had a massive learning curve since picking up this role and learning more about vegetation and tree management on the railway. My background is actually civils and a lot of many years spent with truck. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of a journey of where we're at, what we've discovered so far, and then lead into how technology is going to help us with vegetation management and vegetation control. I'm sorry I couldn't meet with you face to face because actually the RSSB are doing a bit of work for us at Network Rail to help us do some research into predicting which trees are going to fall over when we have high winds. So I could have killed two birds with one stone. It's probably not the right thing to say in a vegetation space, but I mean in the RSSB there as well. So I'll go straight into it. The way that we currently look at vegetation and our vegetation compliance is through on-foot inspections and cab rides. And our inspectors go out and are required to do vegetation and tree inspections once every 3 years. And they go, as I mentioned, on foot. Competency is varied, let's say, when it comes to looking for what problems we've got and identifying various diseases, pests, various species of trees, and vegetation altogether. So I presented a little figure here that shows that we're in year 2 of 3. That's why you've got some wedges. And we will be starting the 3rd year, which will close those grays out for our full 3-year inspection. And then we'll repeat again. But you can see here that things look, I guess they look okay. You've got some green, no action required, so that's quite good. It's 157,087 inspected in this data set. And yes, we've got some signal sighting issues and train contact and a bit of vegetation to the overhead line. But nothing that's insurmountable. Well, probably the one thing that does worry me is train contact, that there's a couple of immediate actions there, and that's a bit worrying. But besides that, you would look at that and go, well, that's not too bad. So surely there's not much to do in this space. Unfortunately, there's a lot to do in this space. So what starts to look like an okay rosy picture, as we move forward, we start to look at some trends that are emerging on the railway. Tree incursions are a really big one that I started to really look into once picking up the role. So since 2017, when I picked up the role of head of line side, I wanted to know what was going on. Is there any sort of patterns and trends? And what you see on the top set of graphs is the number of vegetation incursions on the line. So this is in front on the track. And there's varying types, categories of these as well. And not everything that lands in front of or on the track is considered a tree. We have shrubs, branches, and twigs. And so the data set below is a subset of the one above. And the one above, it says, here's vegetation, trees of all types falling on the railway. And the one below are those that were large enough to cause a derailment. And so we're looking at chest height, 150 mil diameter is what we say is the minimum diameter, which can cause a derailment risk. And the alarming thing, the spikes are related to extreme and adverse weather events where we've got lots of gusty winds. And what you'll see, if you're a little bit astute at looking at this, and Power BI isn't great at doing trend lines, which is one of my bugbears, the trend is going ever so slightly upwards. For the number of incursions, it actually is going up, and we're looking, if we did draw a trend line in there, from the start of the data set, you're at least doubling the number of incursions that are happening as an increasing trend. And And then what worries me more is around the derailment risk. And what we can see is that the number of related to extreme and adverse weather events becomes quite scary. No one wants to see over 300 trees on the line that have an element of derailment risk. So for me, it's a trend that's going the wrong way, and luck runs out, and I would rather it not happen on my watch or ever actually. So we keep an eye on it, and we take it very seriously. Now that's just normal trees and weather. On top of that, we've got a category called hazardous trees. And hazardous trees are those that are close enough to the railways so that should they fall, they would fall onto the railway. These are trees, 150 mil diameter at chest height. And these are also inclusive of any sort of dead, dying, or diseased trees, which are also of that size. Now, there's a couple of things on this graph, these two data sets that I wanted to show in my setting of the scene before I get into the fun stuff of the technology, is that hazardous trees. Now, the number of hazardous trees is looking really scary as well, as far as the number of that need to be addressed in a relatively short period of time. This data set was cut on the 2nd of November, and Wales having over 12,000 trees that need to be addressed, need to be mitigated, in other words, felled, coppiced, or pollard, within 13 weeks. They just don't have the resource to do it. And so they sit with a high risk of not managing it within the risk mitigations identified. And then you've got some smaller numbers, but still 72 hours is not a long time from identifying that a tree needs to be mitigated, and 389 trees. Now, Wales is showing a very high number, and we are doing a review, as is Wessex. Sorry, Wales and Wessex are both showing a very high number. We know that ash dieback is predominant in those areas, more so than in other routes. But what's also alarming is that how quickly those numbers are rising up. And the bottom graph shows a predicted mortality of ash. So unfortunately, all ash trees in the UK will be exposed to ash dieback. There is no available cure, so that those trees will die. And there's about a 3-year, from a time that a healthy tree is infected to the time that it dies, you're looking at about 3 years. And the science is saying that it's predominantly in the southeast, so it's starting to spread from the southeast, work its way up towards Scotland. But these figures are predicted mortality rates based on the number of ash trees, based on sampling in each of the routes. Now, Network Rail has approximately 3.3 million ash trees. And of those, not all of them are within falling distance of the railway. About 400,000, we're saying, just over 10%, are in the corridor, that they're big enough and that they're large enough that should they fall, they will fall onto our infrastructure. So overhead line, the track, stations in that side. There is concern of trees falling outside of our boundary fence because we are liable should anything happen with our trees falling on third-party land and damaging infrastructure or property or hurting anyone. So there's liabilities even there going outside the boundary. So we need to look beyond the boundary as well. So I'm painting quite a scary, horrible scene at the moment, and it is going to get worse. So RAIB they investigate anytime we have had any issues. I've put three photographs or 3 examples. We've had Lavington, which happened in 2010. The train was so damaged that it was unable to move and had to be towed. Sorry, that's not the right word. Somebody will correct me when you tow a train. The driver was injured. Thankfully, they sustained minor injuries and is recovered. No one else was injured. the incident at Spittal. Again, quite a scary incident. Driver was not injured, luckily was okay, but quite scary still. And in Glencarse, in Scotland, the driver did receive some injuries there. As you can see from the photograph on the very, very right, that tree trunk and that large branch went through the window. Nothing for driver to do other than to see that tree coming right at him. They just can't do anything about it. Now, Lavington was a investigation that RAID did as part of a formal investigation, and they raised a recommendation to Network Rail based on that incident back in 2010, that Network Rail should review and enhance its processing for gathering intelligence about neighbouring land where there may be high risk of a tree fall affecting the railway. I'm not going to read the rest because it's not just third-party trees. Some of these other trees are our Network Rail trees. It's not always third party. Spittal and Glencarse were safety and digest, so they weren't a formal investigation that RAID conducted. And all three of these are available on the RAID website. You can go through and read all the detail. And I'm expecting 2 more reports. Uphill was where we actually had a tree fall and hit a person or one of our front line. And then the biggest RAID investigation that's coming around trees and trains is the Salisbury Tunnel derailment, which for my part is looking at leaf fall and low adhesion, where we have high risk low adhesion sites, and how we manage vegetation around those areas, and where we've got leaf fall. So certain species of trees that contribute to low adhesion are the broadleaf trees. So those 2 reports, Uphill and Salisbury Tunnel. Salisbury Tunnel we're expecting at the end of the month. And Uphill, I believe, will also be arriving in November from RAID. Now, those are sort of safety performance issues that I've just kind of covered. But our challenges don't just end there. Back in 2018, a review was published by John Varley, who was Sir John Varley, who was commissioned by the DFT to look into Network Rail's vegetation management. The review came off the back of some bad publicity, which then led up to MPs and DFT getting involved. The Guardian published an article saying Network Rail is secretly cutting down 10 million trees at night. There's a couple of things that were right and wrong about that statement. Yes, Network Rail do cut trees. Yes, there are millions of trees on the railway. Yes, we cut them at night because that's when trains don't run, but we weren't cutting all 10 million trees in the middle of the night. And nor do we actually have enough resources, funding, time to do that. We are really, as I showed you in the previous slides, the list of things to do is ever increasing. But John Varley came in and he looked at the railway and said, I need to review your vegetation management, and I need to give you a kicking. So I'd like for you to tell me where you'd like to kick me, but I'd also, like to look at what you're all doing. And he's an estate manager from a large estate down in Devon, and he came through with what looks to be quite simple 6 recommendations. That's nice and easy, but each one of these recommendations had lots of subsets to it, and they're not easy. They're not easy recommendations. So we should have a clear policy. Yeah, the government should set a clear policy. Yeah, okay. Anything clear about the government? Doubt it. We should have appropriate governance in place. Sure, okay. We should have an ambitious vision of what we're going to do with our line-side estate. And we started to work on that, actually. If you're familiar, Network Rail have published a environment sustainability strategy. And I have a task to write the line-side technical strategy, which I haven't done yet, but it's something I will be working on. Number 4 is an interesting one. Network Rail must value and manage its line-side estate. And what he meant by that, what John meant by that, I'm sorry, I'm very familiar, a lot of meetings. What Mr. Varley meant by that was that At the moment, the way that the railway manage vegetation is as a threat. It's signal sighting issue, it's level crossing issue, it's touching over the headline, it's a threat. Just chop it down, don't think about it, go away. And then you come back again and you chop it down and you go away. And then you come back and chop it down and you go away. We're not actually looking at it properly, the line side estate. We're not managing it. We're not recognizing the biodiversity that lives within that green infrastructure, and nor are we managing habitats. And not everything needs to be a hack down. You don't need to fell trees. You can coppice, you can pollard, you can thin the canopy, and all of those things support the sustainability and global targets that we've got to reduce carbon, to support biodiversity, but at the same time help Network Rail to run a safe and performing railway, which he absolutely understood that safety and performance had to be there. But right on the heels of safety and performance were our environmental commitments and requirements. And the last two was about improving comms with our line side neighbors, and a cultural change, which is never easy to do. It doesn't happen overnight. So Network Rail have been working on these. These were published in 2018, and the John Varley review is also available for review. It's on the DFT website. It looks like that. It's a nice glossy little document to read. I think it's quite well written, easy to digest, but quite challenging for Network Rail to get to that place, and we're still working on it. In addition to Network Rail having to manage biodiversity, habitat, and look at the green infrastructure as a valuable thing, we also have to comply to legal requirements and legislation around, for example, tree preservation orders. And some trees have protection, and we have to protect those trees. So it isn't just as easy to say, all those trees on the railway, we can just do what we like. We cannot. And you can have a tree preservation on a singular tree, or you can have a conservation area where all of the trees in that area are protected. There are some exceptions. So if it's dying, or sorry, it's dead, or if you're removing some branches, or if there is an immediate risk of serious harm, you can go ahead and address those. But our frontline are very nervous about doing that because you as a person would be liable, not the company. So there's a lot of concerns, and we work very closely with our liabilities teams to support our maintenance teams in understanding what they can and can't do, and to get it very clear what is immediate risk of serious harm, what does that mean, and how do you prove it, and then how do you action what you need to do. So we do a lot with liabilities. Liabilities also help us, our liabilities team in Network Rail also help us look at when it comes to third-party trees and what Network Rail can do when we have third-party trees near the railway. I would say that our incursions are about 50-50. 50% of them are third-party trees and 50% of them are Network Rail trees. And not all trees falling on the line are dead either. Some of them are quite healthy. So quite a difficult thing to predict. Going back to third-party trees, so there are some things that we can do as a landowner when it comes to our neighbors' trees. So you can, any sort of trees overhanging the boundary can be cut to the boundary line. Just make sure you know where your boundary line is. Any arisings that fall belong to the owner, which always feels a bit like a kick in the teeth, but there you go. So you cut it down and then you have to offer it to the owner. You can't, and by the way, you can't just chuck it over the fence and go, there you go, that's yours. Otherwise that's fly tipping. So you gotta be careful what you do there. So you gotta agree with the landlord on what, where we're gonna do this work. Would you like these branches or these trimmings arising? Some things could be valuable. So people talk about like fruit or vegetation or composted stuff. So what do you do with the stuff that you cut? You could use it for bug hotels. You could use it to build. I know in Scotland there's a lot to do for hedgehogs, and we do hedgehog highways and build little I'm going to call them nests, but that's not the right word. I told you I was an engineer. Little huts. Let's just call them hedgehog huts. Again, somebody will correct me. And the odd one is falling leaves are not a legal nuisance. So you can't say to a third party tree, your leaves are causing a problem. Too bad, those leaves are there and the wind takes them where the wind will take them, which becomes another interesting challenge when it comes to leaf fall and how we Network Rail have a massive challenge around how we're going to manage that. And so that is our sort of our Network Rail trees, third party trees. Now we do have Regulation Act. But like any large company, you don't want to, we are hesitant to kind of come in heavy handed with, here's section 24, I can do this, I am Network Rail. We don't often like to do that. We try as much as we can to communicate with our neighbors and talk about what it is that we need to do. We even offer to fell trees and take the cost ourselves when we realize that there's a high hazardous tree, a third party hazardous tree that's posing a risk. If all else fails and we're just not moving forward and we're not getting that, we can go in and do a removal, but the legal part of it is a nightmare. So we try not to have to get, this is our last resort. Section 24 is the last resort. And finally, I mentioned biodiversity and habitat, but ecology in general, what we have to do and when we can work is also a really, really big challenge. So we're talking about nesting birds and being very careful around nesting birds, around badgers and the newts, and when we can work, what we're allowed to do, what we have to check for, because again, very concerned, our frontline very concerned that should they cause any harm, they will be liable. So what do they need to do if I go to do vegetation clearance and there's nesting birds there? What do I do? And birds don't just nest in trees, they also nest in the grasses and the shrubs, so you have to be even extra careful when you're looking at all of that. So I painted a picture around safety and performance, around what we should be doing from a value perspective, around legal and around ecology. So lots of challenges, lots of risks. On the flip side, also lots of opportunities for biodiversity and habitat management. Being the carbon, the green infrastructure is what offsets the carbon footprint. So it's a great place for that. We can do more with bug hotels and bird nest, bird boxes and vet boxes, etc. We are starting to do that. Climate change and extreme and adverse weather trends cause us no end of pain. You saw in the tree incursion data set that extreme weather, and I'm talking about lots of rain as well as gusts of wind, sort of 40, 49, 50 miles an hour. Anything higher than that, we're looking at operational delays and speed restrictions on due to high winds. And so these things are causing us a problem. The flip side of it is that when you have a heat wave, as we experienced this summer, we also see an impact on the railway when it comes to vegetation. So the heat that we experienced this summer stressed the trees to a point that they started to go into what we call the false autumn. So the false autumn was triggered by the heat. The heat caused the trees stress, and so what the trees do is they preserve their energy by starting to drop their leaves on the outer edges, which meant that for us, leaf fall was starting in sort of end of August, early September. We thought, what is going on here? You wouldn't normally expect that. And we don't really know sort of until we have sort of a whole year what the impact of that heat wave season will be. And if another one occurs, what will happen to vegetation? When is the new autumn? What is summer? These are really challenging questions that climate change and extreme and adverse weather trends are presenting. So we have to keep on it. Just when you think you've cleared an eighth and you've got a lovely profile and everything's hunky-dory and you walk away, the vegetation and trees start growing behind you. So you can't stop. They're coming after you. And it's something that we have to keep on top of and manage. Competence and training is not comprehensive. I'm working on that by creating a more comprehensive course around tree inspection, around recognizing through our inspection and maintenance what sort of things our frontline need to look at, not turning them into ecologists or environmentalists, but giving them enough of the skills and the tools that they know what it is that they should be able to do. So I painted a bleak picture. Now let's get into some fun, rosy stuff here. What can we do? What are we doing to help create the balance between safety, performance, and the environment? And that's where we go into a very busy slide. But one of the large tools that we're developing called Digitalized Line Side Inspection, DLI for short. DLI is taking 3 different data sources and bringing them together so that we can basically move away from on-foot and cab ride inspections to using digital inspections and having metrics that are regularly measured as encroachment. Give me square meters of encroachment, tell me the number of dead, dying, and diseased trees, and tell me growth rate, etc. So these are sort of the potential things that we'll have. DLI in its first release will have forward-facing video and will have LiDAR, so aerial survey, LiDAR data mapped together so that you can look at the train driver's perspective and an aerial perspective to look at canopy and encroachment. Put those 2 together where you've got problems with both. We're measuring where we've got those encroachment, and we can then through DLI raise work straight into Ellipse, which is what Network Rail uses to manage inspection and maintenance work orders. So we're able to use that. This will allow us. People think, well, oh, then we'll need less people on the ground. I'll need less inspectors, but I will need a whole lot more people managing vegetation, because now not only do I have a forward facing, but I've got a top down view. And because we're using forward facing video, we are doing inspections more than once every 3 years. We are doing them at the frequency that we can collect the high quality video. And so DLI is quite exciting in this space. So I mentioned there's going to be forward facing video. There'll be LiDAR data. The third data set that will feed into DLI will be hyperspectral imagery that is being collected to look at tree vitality. So imagine I've got a tool that's going to give you a forward-facing view, a top-down view, and I'm going to give you a thermal view. The reason for the thermal view is that we collect that data in the leaves on season, and based on how healthy the trees are and their heat signature and how many leaves and their canopies are populated can give us an indication that the trees are healthy or not healthy. And so that is quite exciting that for the first time we can look at that, because currently we send people out to walk trackside and look for dead, dying, and diseased trees. Now we can do it nationally through technology and very quickly. So let me show you a little bit like what these tools look like. So I just don't show you a cartoon view. They are a bit further ahead than the cartoon view. So when you log into DLI, and apologies, the DLI release 1 is it's imminent, but it has not happened just yet. So I don't have a live tool I can show you. When you log into DLI, it recognizes who you are and will say, right, so what work orders do you currently have? And you might have inspection work orders or maintenance work orders to do. And so those will be pulled out of Ellipse, and you'll be able to look at what work you've got planned in the system. You select your work order, and then from that work order, and apologies that the screens, the map would be on top of the work order, but we're trying to show you everything on a page. So in the image above, you get the LiDAR data, and you can see that there is our favorite red, amber, green color coding. So red signifies encroachment within the action zone. If you're familiar with the OTK 5201 standard, which is the vegetation management standard, we have an immediate action zone, which is basically overhead line and rail and trains, they're being touched. So immediately need to do something. Then you have an alert zone that just goes a bit further out and goes to the CES and comes up and includes all of the overhead line, including the return conductor. So that's your immediate zone. And then the outer bits are what we call our alert zone, is in keep an eye on it when you're doing inspections. So the red in the image that is shown on the screen at the bottom right-hand corner is immediate action. Amber is action, and green is, yeah, you're okay. Just, keep an eye out, but it's fine, further away. So a work order would be located on an ELR mileage. You'd go in there, you'd see the LiDAR data. And then you want to go in deeper. You're going to go show me some more information. So you would go into the specific inspection and you would say, right, I would like to see, you're on the left-hand side, you'll see the aerial map. And on that aerial map, and of course, if this is flat, you'll have multiple layers that you can take on and off. You can look at satellite imagery, you could look at DTM, digital terrain model, you can look at the LiDAR data on top, or you could just take and strip all that out and just look at a very simple line. Next to it will be the forward-facing video footage. That forward-facing video footage is being pulled through a technology called AIVR. So One Big Circle is the company that's running that, and we are connecting with One Big Circle to bring that forward-facing video into our imagery. And then the two basically are synchronized. So you've got your aerial view and you've got your video view. Now I can sit in an office and I can then scroll forward and do my vegetation inspection. That would equate to what a cab ride or an on-foot inspection would cover. Now, on-foot inspection would cover more, but from an vegetation encroachment perspective, I can capture that. And so you would go forward and look at that. We would be able to load the latest video footage. If there happened to be older video footage, you can then play the older video footage and the latest video footage to see any differences. So growth patterns, if the video footage were, say, a year or 2 years apart, that's absolutely okay, because you would be able to map out where the growth had occurred and how much it had grown, and you can then look at that to use that first mentally as the human to predict growth models. But in a future update of DLI, we will use machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence, to be able to do that growth prediction for us, to say this is where the problems are. What this image also doesn't show, which will also come, is when you have the forward-facing video, we will have red, amber, green lines drawn on it. So what, like you had on the top with your red, amber, green, you'll see a forward-facing red, amber, green as well, to just really help delineate what's in the immediate and the action zone. And then what we've got to support DLI, and at the moment it's sitting next to DLI, but it's still part of the DLI project, but it's a slightly different tool that in the second release will be merged together, is a tool called the Tree Risk Manager. Now, the Tree Risk Manager looks at satellite imagery and LiDAR, so still looking at the top down. And what we're looking at is various layers. So in Network Rail's GIS system, we already have all the plotted out tree preservation orders and conservation areas. Those are already plotted out. So you can turn that layer on and look at what you're seeing and where you're at. And then the hyperspectral data that I mentioned has already been captured, and that is already mapped out there. So every tree is geospatially mapped. It's about all geospatial tagging. We do not want to go cut trees we don't have to cut, because remember, we're also carbon and biodiversity. So on the very bottom right-hand image, what you see is the results of the hyperspectral imagery that shows which trees are in various states of health, vitality, and then the scoring looks at how big that tree is and how close to the railway it is, and brings those two things together. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to play a video that, well, actually it starts automatically. The video is playing. There's no sounds, don't worry, so I can talk over it. This video shows how you can scroll through different data layers and different one risk scoring, but also vitality scoring, how you can zoom into an area, and you've got the satellite imagery as well. And you could zoom in and specifically look to say, I want to look at one particular tree, or I want to look at one area. It's loading, sorry, there we go. There's the pause. So you see the trees underneath, and you'll see the images on top. You could see the red ones are where the trees are highly stressed, aka unhealthy. So that's an inference to that they are dead, dying, or diseased. You can specifically GIS tag a tree. If work has already been completed, so you raise a work order, frontline go out and remove those trees. In the tree risk manager, you can actually tag it to say it's been removed, it's protected, or we're planning to remove it. So you can start to show work by tagging individual trees and grouping that up. The corridor that we're looking at within the tree risk manager goes beyond our boundary. Forgive me, I think it goes 50 meters beyond. I think I should have confirmed that. It goes beyond our boundary. So what that means is we're not only are we looking at network route trees, but we are also identifying third-party trees which have a potential to cause risk. And this next image zooms in and shows there's a third part, not that one, it's getting there soon. It'll show a group of third-party trees that are looking to be stressed. It's coming soon. Just at the top of the screen. So there's a cluster of trees that are on the other side of our property line. And depending on how big they are, they potentially could fall onto the railway, take down the overhead line. So we would keep an eye out on those, or we might just talk to the landowner and talk about what we're going to do to manage those. And so using the tree risk manager, which at the moment is live separately to DLI, and then eventually those two are going to come together in the next release, release 2, they will come together. And then the third thing will be around raising machine learning and AI. So our DLI is quite a big project that is in use with the tree risk manager. The other area that we're looking at is use of drones and drone technologies, and this is quite a fascinating area for a geek like me. I'm just like, wow. So there are drones that are currently being used to spray herbicide or pesticide on agricultural farms already, and they're geospatially they're mapped out geospatially, so they know where to go, what to do, and these are happening now in the US already, but they're also happening here in the UK. And so we've started to look at what we can do to use that sort of technology. And Railscape have won an award for first of a kind in innovation under the Innovate UK project for the use of drones for spraying non-native species. So they're really looking at buglia and onto sort of brickwork, but we're looking more about what else can we do. And I've heard that there's also the use of laser technology, also mounted on drones. So you're not using the herbicides and pesticides, but you're using laser technology to zap and look at sort of Japanese knotweed, hogwort, ragwort, and that way our people aren't in harm's way, or they're not at risk of getting these herbicides or pesticides on them. And what I should have also mentioned in DLI is that what I showed you was some layering, but we have existing layers that we can also bring in to help with the decision making. And there's layers I mentioned around tree preservation orders and conservation locations, but there are also data layers where we have, for example, low adhesion. So wouldn't it just be grand to know where low adhesion exists and where certain species of trees exist? And then we target those trees to prevent the leaf fall and low adhesion sites. At the moment, they're separate in separate parts, and it's about bringing the information together and then prioritizing where to do work, because we don't have a lot of people on the ground to do this work. And it's about really prioritizing, going once, doing the work once, and really looking at upskilling our frontline so they're more aware and knowledgeable of what it is that they need to do, and they can make these frontline decisions a bit for themselves. And so therein ends my presentation, and I'll open the floor to any questions you might have. I'll stop sharing so I can see people as well.
Okay, thank you. And I just got one to start off with.
Sure.
Which budget do you think should be funding tree works? Because who benefits from this?
Ah, ah. So, so at the moment, it's a bit of a hodgepodge. Drainage and line side previously never had their own budget. They were always a subset of track. However, I would say this because I'm the head of drainage and line side, but over the past sort of 3 to 4 years, we've seen some pretty major incidents that have been as a result of our underinvestment and sort of lack of appreciation, lack of value or recognition for the drainage and line side estate. And so there have been changes made where drainage and line side now have their own budget, and that's OPEX as well as CAPEX. And that then allows the off-track teams to manage their assets, the blue, green, gray, the blue being drainage and water, the gray being the boundaries, the access facilities, the walkways, and the green being the vegetation and trees, better. In the space of CapEx, what's quite interesting there is when you have capital works, if you've got capital works that are doing a large amount of vegetation clearance, then the biodiversity, you must have no net biodiversity loss by 2024. And so projects have to start to look at how they will offset the loss of biodiversity from their projects. And that might be replanting off network rail land further away. It might be through sort of supporting biodiversity. And we're talking about insects here. That's what we're looking to encourage, is that insect life. So it might be around restoring the natural habitats that were there. So if you've got a break in the green infrastructure, a wooded area, nothing, and then a wooded area, you would replant to create a nice corridor, and that there supports that. So at the moment, the budgets for CAPEX for vegetation, replanting, biodiversity, habitat reenactment, and ash dieback actually are coming out of capital investment funding projects as a program of work. And the regular day-to-day is coming out of off-track, but we're devolved. So some regions it's under track, and some regions it's actually has its own budget. It's a complicated question, which I think you probably met was an easy one.
Can be Fiona. You can mute and ask your question.
Sorry, is that me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was. I was interested in your reference to low adhesion and wanting to be able to coincide with your species, and I'm wondering what's the time frame for being able to do that and have them in one kind of system.
Oh, I'm hoping by release 2. It's got to be imminent. Some of the recommendations come out of Salisbury Tunnel is around sharing of information and making sure that everyone who's got to work around leaf fall and adhesion has the same data set and is looking at the right things. So we know that signaling and the train operating companies are recording the locations of low adhesion. Signaling is looking at where trains are running signal overruns. Line side knows where certain trees are, but not 3 of us aren't talking to each other. So it's about getting the 3 of us together and going, right, I've got to do vegetation management. You're the seasonal delivery special in operations. You're the train operator who knows where you're experiencing the low adhesion. We need to coordinate that information in one version of the truth. And then when we have mitigation plans, like removing the trees or coppicing the trees, or where we're not doing that, what are we doing when it comes to sort of the railhead treatment of adhesion? That's not quite nicely aligned at the moment, and we're going to be working on that pretty much January. Yeah.
So will there be a system available in January then, or is that?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. There's data sets available. It's about getting those data sets mapped and put into one place so that we can look at it. And GRV is a good, GRV Viewer is Network Rail's GIS platform. It's perfect for that because we can take it lat long, northings and eastings, or ELR mileage and plug that on top. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We got Sean Tarrant.
Couple of questions. The first one, is it possible to couple the tree risk manager with a safety curtain to identify suitable corrective measures? So, you know, where you can work with OLE on or off, say for instance.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, so we so we've had a recent incident with we had a recent incident. So because of that, Network Rail at the moment is saying all OLE must be off. That is it. We don't work with that, you know, with any sort of vegetation clearance when it's close to overhead lines, and we must have it off. The thing is what we got to work. What we forget, and on Network, what Network Rail forget is we trim the vegetation, and then we walk away, think it's all done. And then 2 years later, we got a problem again, because where you trim a tree, the tree sends extra energy to compensate and reform its shape. So it grows faster than if you just left it alone. And so really what we need to do is one, if the vegetation that is there is going to create a problem going on and on, then the treatment has to be much more severe, as in felling the tree or just coppicing, pollarding the tree. And that's what we don't do at the moment. We sort of trim the branches around overhead line. And I feel like, and that's because our to-do list is so huge. So it's got to be, the strategy is visit an eighth, get it all compliant, and then put the right MSTs in, maintenance schedule tasks, to make sure that we keep on top of it. I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
Okay.
The second part of the second question I have for you is, you talked a lot about ash dieback.
Yes.
What about alum? Are you still having difficulties with alum, or is that all dealt with now?
It's not as much as ash dieback. There's larches come up as well, but the other ones are not as big. They're more. There are other diseases that affect trees, but ash dieback is the one that, just by the sheer number of ash trees that are that is definitely a scary one that we're seeing. Whereas the other ones there are other diseases, yes, that affect trees, but nothing like ash dieback, which, in my simple mind, ash dieback is like COVID. There's no cure, and it's just spreading really quickly. So all we're doing is responding. There are other diseases. And if I had my team member here who's a chartered forester, he'd give you a much more knowledgeable and informed answer to that. But the hyperspectral imagery picks up all dead, dying, or diseased trees, not just ash dieback.
Yeah, so by extension, if something new came up, he'd be able to identify it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. There's sufficient intelligence in the way it's being picked up to do that.
And we want to learn more, like what else can we find out from hyperspectral data? Is there more that we can extract from there other than just the health of the tree, like maybe the species of the tree?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Have John Delvin next.
Hey, one thing you didn't mention when you were going through animals at the start was rabbits.
Yes.
And clearly, with banks becoming far more treed rather than grassed, rabbits busy digging holes in banks isn't a great idea.
No.
And I'm just wondering how these days you manage rabbits, which of course, unlike the other animals, are actually a pest rather than a protected animal, and how you deal with, because the other problem is with all the wooded banks, it's difficult to spot where you've actually got holes from rabbits.
Yes. So there's a couple of things. The ideal profile of vegetation is your low grasses, then your shrubs, your woody shrubs, and then your trees. That's if we could start the railway again, that's how we would plant everything and have that. So that's what we're trying to create moving forward. But rabbits and beavers and badgers and anything else that burrows, at the moment all vermin management is brought in, so it's through the supply chain that we bring them in. I'm not sure whether the numbers are going higher or lower, to be honest with you, John. Apologies, I don't have that data to hand. When I asked the frontline folks about competency and training, should we be improving our competency training around vermin management? The answer was no, we really buy that in. At the moment, we're just trying to keep up with the vegetation, the non-native invasive species stuff. So my apologies. I don't know whether it's getting better or worse or the same in the regards to sort of burrowing animals. I'm not sure. It's not great for drainage either.
No, I noticed you were talking about using the drones for killing vegetation. I mean, one of the things that I foam at the mouth most days on is the stuff on the top of the viaduct up from London Bridge to Blackfriars, where the bushes growing out of the inside of the viaduct are actually following the profile of the trains. You know, you can actually see the shape of the train, and this is this isn't a country branch line. This is a viaduct on top of a viaduct with 12-car trains every few minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm just waiting for a spandrel to fall.
Oh gosh. Well, John, if you're nervous about that, please do take some photos and send, you can send them into our Network Rail help desk. We've got fault control and there's CCIL, and apologies, I should have numbers as well, but you can get that information over if there's something that is of concern. And if it's not ours, if it's ASPRO, then we need to also get on top of that as well. It seems to be scary stuff going on with legacy historic buildings and our infrastructure. We're just not really ahead of the game. I think historically we think, well, it's a big building or it's a big bridge. It's going to last 150 years, 200.
Yeah, you just have a look at London Bridge to Blackfriars on your video system and just watch, because you're on top of the viaduct, and the trees are inside the parapet.
Yikes. Okay.
And brushed on with the trains.
Right. London Bridge to Blackfriars. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. I'll do that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Leave that one with you.
Thank you.
Can I
more actions.
Sorry, is it Katriona or Katriona?
Yeah, it's Katrina. Yeah, I've got 3 questions if you don't mind. One is, are they the forward-facing cameras, are they on passenger trains or are they dedicated measuring trains?
So the forward-facing videos from One Big Circle are at the moment, I believe they are on a mixture of trains. So some are on our PLPR, some are on passenger trains. The camera itself is owned by One Big Circle, which is the supplier company, and we are at Network Rail working with them because we looked at before we used One Big Circle, we were looking at if we used our fleet cameras. Hindsight again is great. They're all different and they're all located in different places in the cab. And we think, so we sat there and said, right, okay. And then the question was, well, what do you want? And of course, we want highest resolution in the same place. And we want no rain, and we want no wipers, and we want clean glass, please. That's what we want. And so what we're doing now is saying, okay, we're not going to have that. So we're trying to build our library up. And this is where the machine learning and the artificial intelligence will come into play. So with the machine learning and artificial intelligence, the more data you give it, the more it can start to figure out what you're trying to do. So if the track is here when my camera's here, brilliant. But if the track is slightly skewed because my camera's here, then it starts to try to support that a little bit. The other thing is different specifications of videos. So the One Big Circle video, the PLPR video, train Toxin Fox video, they're all different specifications. So if we can have, our dream is the PLPR is the best because it's the latest fleet. So that's the best one. If I can have that, I'll take that, please. If I don't have that, what's next? What's next? What's next? And then it's the frequency as well of the data collection. So there's a lot of things to work about and look at. If I could start again, I wouldn't use forward-facing video. It is a nightmare to model. It is a nightmare. You would use RILA or point cloud data or laser scan data. That's the best, because you go from that immediately to modeling. You don't have to do processing. Whereas a photograph is a flat still image and you're trying to get a computer to recognize what that flat image is. So.
Okay, thank you. That's perfect.
Sure.
That's the second question is, have you done any calculations on the social value of the vegetation and values for a carbon sink?
Yeah,
and
so
have you compiled any data that can be used and shared? Because I'm actually going to task to do this.
Yeah, no, we have. I haven't. Network Rail's environment sustainability team and our biodiversity strategy manager are mapping it all out. So we have a carbon calculator, we have a biodiversity calculator. We are looking at net natural capital and what these things equate to. So those calculators are currently being developed now. So the biodiversity one's an interesting challenge because we've got SEPA, EA, and then Natural Resources Wales, slightly different with the three of them and how they calculate biodiversity scores, because by 2024 we must show no net loss, and then by 2035 we have to show a gain. So you got to measure it somehow, and it doesn't happen instantaneously. You don't build a bug hotel and then 1 week later go, oh look, you know, you're gonna wait a while. So it takes some time to do all of that. So Network Rail in our environment and sustainability team do have those calculators. I know we've got a carbon tool. From a social aspect, we know that social psychologists talk about, especially in deprived areas, having green spaces reduces crime, reduces stress. It's a place of, it's calming. Even if you have potted plants in an office, it reduces your stress levels. I need more plants in this office. It reduces your stress level. That is documented and scientifically available. And so in my area, what I would love for us to start to push towards is using our boundary walls and measures for green walls, or creating sort of social spaces. If I can be cheeky and share the vision as future vision, I just threw it up at my last, but I didn't give you time to really look at it. This is a future vision of what we would like for off track, and creating social spaces next to stations where the community can do gardening and allotments, or having green walls to support that carbon offset and that positive social impact. The things are there. We just have to start looking at them a little bit differently. And it might be weird. We're here to run a railway. Yeah, but we also have a social responsibility. And our future passengers won't accept a polluting, high carbon, biodiversity killing railway. They won't accept it.
So thank you. My third question is to do with like what budgets you've got for what mileage. Or kilometrage, and do you use your figures that you've got for, say, social value and for carbon to try to help justify your budgets, or at all, or is that not there?
We're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're not mature enough yet. The question that Michael asked about, you know, who funds the line side is interesting, because at the moment it's a bit hodgepodge. Track do some, off track do some of it will be through our big projects and so forth. So I don't have a cost per linear, but what we do have is what volume of work are we doing, and the volume of work we can equate to an FTE hour, and then we can convert that to a pound sign. I haven't, but I could, to what is the average cost of an operative, for example, and I could work that out. Everything's so reactive at the moment as well. It's not the most ideal way to work. The emergency tree removal of a tree on the line is £5,000. If we planned that work with an arboriculturist and a protection team, you're looking at about 2,000, 2,500. So that's 50% less if plan removal, which is what we want to do with the dead, dying and diseased trees, and not wait for them to fall and then pay £5,000 to remove it with, and that's not including the delays and the safety element to the driver. So I don't have a per kilometer cost. Might be something good to do, especially in these trying financial times.
So I'm wondering, is like your long-term strategy to require more funding, or because you've now got more tools, you said that it's actually likely initially to identify more work, but over time, will it actually be costing less?
I think it'll cost less, and I think it's the way that we do work. So for example, when we're doing vegetation clearance, you can either say, right, remove all the arisings off the railway, or you use the arisings to create your biodiversity, your bug hotels, your sort of nested little nests and huts and so forth. So we could do that as well. Planting, these aren't expensive things. They don't happen overnight, though. That's the problem. And some of them, need a bit of that aftercare as well. Turning a wall that's full of graffiti and working with a community to turn that into a graffiti art wall, it isn't difficult. It's communication with people. It's talking to people and giving them ownership to create art on it. Green walls also, we're talking ivies and things that grow. Of course, don't randomly do it, obviously thoughtfully done. These things don't cost more, and felling a tree could cost more than pollarding. So it's knowing what treatment to do, because felling a tree, you could kill the stump and it's dead, or you can fell it but keep the stump alive so that you're supporting life in saplings coming up, or you pollard it, and so therefore again supporting the biodiversity at the bottom. There's so many things, and I'm not an ecologist or an arboriculturalist or even a forester, but my team keep, they're like, oh, you could do this way, you could do that way. So it's about having knowledge about what we should do and do work more smartly. So I don't think it will cost more. I think it's just being more creative and thinking differently than we currently do.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's all about kind of the business case as well,
It is. The what? Why? Yeah.
Thank you. I could ask you questions all night, but I won't hog it. So maybe I can follow up with you, separately outside of this forum.
Yes, sure,
Okay.
Katrina.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Can I get Paul Abbott? You've got your hand up.
Hi, thanks, Mike. Excellent talk. Thanks very much, Mona. Much appreciated. And a couple of things. First thing is thanks for the discussion about green spaces around the railway. I do a bit for the Community Rail Partnership on the Wessex.
Nice. Lovely.
And that's music to my ears.
Yes.
And I've managed to get one or two small, big wins down on what's called the Alton branch, where a lot of people know I live. But that's fantastic. And community rail partnerships and local communities are really keen, in my experience, to work with the railway industry. And maybe we can put a presentation together in years to come about working together. It'd be great. But my simple question is, what level of sort of competence knowledge do you anticipate or expect your operatives reviewing the data from your sort of CCTV data to have? So some people would sort of, going back to UK youth, would it be a sort of ladybird book of trees, or book of trees, or a degree?
No, Paul, I think we are at the ladybird part at the moment. I was quite surprised, I would say, when I started to really look into drainage and line side, including drainage as well, the blue, green, gray, what competencies existed, what occupational tickets existed. So lots of occupational tickets on chainsaws, pole saw, bushwhackers, bush cutters, streamers. Yep, I'll give you that. But I'm not going to tell you what a tree looks like, and I'm not going to tell you what a diseased tree looks like, and I'm not going to train you on the legal requirements either. I'll train you how to use a chainsaw. It made no sense to me. And I thought, wait a minute. We need to really get the knowledge part supporting the skills and competency part. So I'm working right now on design content to create e-learning material for the blue, green, gray within drainage and line side, within off track, within Network Rail. There's no even off track trainers in Network Rail. I'm just like, where do you start? And And it's not just the green part. I mean, I'm still reeling off of Carmont with recommendations on competent qualified drainage people, and we're thinking, yikes. So there's a lot to do. I will not turn people into ecologists or arboriculturalists. If they wish to do that, wonderful. We have a department that do that. So for me, in the space of off track, it's really exciting because I've got quite a lot of diversity in this group. If someone in our front line currently deal with the blue, green, gray, they go out and they'll do drainage maintenance. And then the next day they'll go out and they'll do veg management. And then the next day they'll go out and repair the boundaries. And you're like, this is the same person. So having them have the basic principles of those three, and whatever they fall in love with gives them a path, a career pathway or an academic pathway to follow. So what I'm talking about, for example, is if I do have an operative who knows nothing, and we train them the basics, what are trees, recognizing common species, common defects, common pests, how common approaches to management, and giving them the tickets to do the tools. If they fall in love with that side, their future can be still within the railway and off track, or they can go, no, I'm absolutely in love with this and I want to do ecology and arboricultural and environmental sciences. Brilliant. To me, that's great. You now have a journey that you can take from a starting point. I said operative, but they can be an apprentice, you know, from that. In the blue space, if they come in and they're going, I really like this, you know, flow of water and just I love it. Great, you can go into hydrology, you can go into hydraulics, you can be a water engineer, you can go into that space, and you can still work for Network Rail, or you can go into a water utility, or you can go, you know, from there and grow. And it's a long journey from there. And then finally with the gray area, if you're like, I have this construction stuff and, you know, building and foundations, that's the start of a civils life there. And you can go into the engineering of a civils engineer, or you can go into construction management, into that space. And so the diversity from somebody in off track who does the blue, green, gray to go into these branches is really, really exciting. And we're creating a career pathway document to support people. I'm really passionate about development and learning, and I think it's, you know, it's for everybody, and it doesn't matter where or when you do it. So we're providing this career pathway that shows all the roles within the business that are in blue, green, gray, and all the professional affiliations that support the blue, green, gray, either one, all, or multiples. PWI is great, it does all three. If you're in love with the water, you might go SciWim. If you want to do civils, there's civils. You know, there's so many. If you want to go to forestry, there's forestry chartered foresters, and water is, there's, you know, there's water man. There's just loads. So
Okay.
so starting
thanks.
is just the principles. We're not doing degrees or anything. It's just the principles of it. Yeah.
So thanks for that. There's great
No worries.
opportunities by the sounds of it for everybody.
I
Thank
hope
you.
so. They're excited as well. Yeah. Thank you.
I think I've got one last question from, is it Rebecca?
Hi, yes. Hi, Mona. That was really interesting. This is my learning is on my camera. Sorry. My learning. Talk about learning journeys. I'm a learning journey from a mechanical railway engineer into understanding civils a bit better, because we've got some of the kit fitted to trains that is looking at the infrastructure, and we want to make that more useful.
Nice.
I was really interested. I think I heard what you said, as I realised that's a space you're excited about. But particularly about the AI and machine learning, that you would like to do more of that with LiDAR, with point cloud. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. No. So we are going to do machine learning and AI even with the forward-facing video, because you can. But hindsight's great, isn't it? If you start again,
much harder.
Yes, it is. It is. There's a few extra steps, let's just say, when you're using a flat screen, which is an image. Whereas when we start looking at things like LiDAR data, which is point cloud or RILA or any sort of data, what I'm being told by those that are more knowledgeable than me in that space is that when you have point cloud data, you can take that and model that much faster than you can trying to figure out, am I looking at a tree or a signal? You know, what is that? And getting the computer to recognize that as well. And I said, if I could start again, I would go, maybe we do that instead. But I realize also the cost and the technology to capture that data is still very high. Network Rail do LiDAR flyovers once a control period. I use Environment Agency LiDAR data for catchment modeling. So it's not there. There's some routes and regions are looking at RILA and using that on train-borne RILA data. But again, it's like it's not everywhere and it's not regular. So what we needed was frequency and quality, high quality, which you get a lot of videos on, hence going that way. But if I could get more LiDAR data, brilliant. But the challenge I'll give you from a train-borne mechanical way is that a lot of our technology look down at the rail, so PLPR is looking down at the rail, or it just looks slightly at the edges. I need to look underneath the ground for drainage, and I need to look out. I need to look out to see what's coming into the encroachment, and those aren't really there so much. And that's why we need that wider view, which we get from the cab view. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it might be worth having a conversation, Mona, if you don't mind, if I could get in touch with you, but
Sure.
rather than boring everybody else. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks. Can I call on Fiona Thompson to do the vote of thanks?
Okay, so I'm hoping to suddenly pop up.
Yes,
Sorry about the lighting may go because I'm in the office and I'm the only person, so I'm obviously not about to get run up and down to get the sensors going again. So apologies if I suddenly go into darkness. But Mona, thank you so much. That was an excellent talk, and it really did spark a lot of interest and a really lively period of questions and discussion. So I want to thank you personally because my background is as a civil engineer on the permanent way, well, on the underground, but you know, this is quite a lot of outdoors anyway. And yes, the permanent way, as far as I'm concerned, is everything, including between the two fences, the boundary fences, and it's not just that. It's certainly not just the track. And I think your presentation today has really shown us that. It's just you're probably preaching to the converted in that sense, but especially love all the social value and the opportunities, because the young people, and when Paul mentioned about getting competence levels up and what we were expecting and so on, but I think it's quite clear that, to me anyway, that I hesitate to say the younger generation, but anyway, they're clearly far more climate oriented and green and wanting to be greener. So wanting us all to be greener. So I think there's probably pushing at open doors, at open ears. I'm not sure what the expression is there. My other interest in trees vegetation generally comes from their interaction with the earth structures, because used to spend many years ago, spend quite a lot of time out and about inspecting earth structures, and tree health or presence, or what the trees were doing, was often an indicator or part and parcel of what was going on with the earth structure.
Yes.
So I think it'd be very interesting as well to understand more of how the line side and drainage actually a group actually sort of deals with the earthworks. But I didn't want to raise that as a question, because I thought I probably would be going
we were into a whole other rabbit hole.
Yes. Yes. I mean, we've had rabbits. I've met rabbits on the network, hedgehogs, badgers, snakes, seagulls, hawks.
We've had a tortoise. We've had a giant tortoise on the railway. Yeah, Clyde.
That's amazing.
He escaped from a wildlife sanctuary and walked down the 4-foot. There's a great photograph. It was in the Guardian. Clyde.
I've missed that. So was Clyde safely returned?
He hit by a train, got a little dent in his shell, but he's alive, and he's now back with his mate. In So
okay, so
he survived. I think it was something like, they thought they could just pick him up and move him, and realized no, manual handling. Nope, it was definitely not a single person lift.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So if we can make the railway Clyde friendly, then that's our aim. Sorry, everyone. I'm probably boring some of you, but with this, or digressing a bit. But yes, just wanted to really say thank you so much for the enthusiasm and for diving in and showing us very much of the current situation, and the sobering, starting off with all the sobering news about the ash dieback and the extreme weather events, but bringing us on with a lot of hope, not just because of the new technology itself, but of what you're planning to do with it. So I'd like to get everyone to clap either virtually or literally. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you.
No,
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you, everyone. Apologies that we couldn't do this face to face.
It doesn't sound so great when it's just me doing this in the
Oh.
thing, but I'm sure everybody else is doing it at home. So
For the videos.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, it would have been nice to meet face to face and just have a chat there. Oh, there's a familiar face, Tom. to have a meet at RSSB for a longer, further discussion. So yeah, maybe next time, another time.
Paul wants to say something else, though.
Yes.
What, Paul? What is it?
Well, when we finished, and thanks to Mona, I would like to just give a sub plug to the Christmas session. I'll give a bit more detail behind that, Mike, before people rush off. Sorry, Mona.
Yes.
No, it's important. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, hopefully you'll be at the Christmas one as well, Mona.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Is that convenient, Mike, for me to just plug it? Just that we've arranged for Andrew Braddock, who's enthusiastic for trams, to come along. So a lighter session for Christmas, but he's really enthusiastic about trams. Some controversial stuff. He's going to talk about European setups compared to what we have in the UK. So come along and challenge him, tell him he's not right, or come and agree with him. So he is a really good speaker, and I just encourage you to come and have a row with him face to face at the RSSB. I hope that helps, Mike.
Yeah, that's on the 14th of December. Okay, thank you very much, and end the meeting there.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, Mike. Take
Bye.
care.
Excellent. Thanks, Fiona, for that sum up. Great stuff.
You're welcome. Okay. Bye, everyone.
I'll be in touch, Fiona.
Yep.